What kind of brother sells his own sister like cattle under the moonlight? That terrifying question burned in Jasmine Edwards' mind as the gunshot echoed across the moonlit plains of the Nebraska Territory. She ran through the tall grass, clutching her thin shawl, her breath breaking in her chest. The night air was cold, sharp, and alive with danger. Behind her came shouts, stomping boots, and her brother Samuel's cruel laugh that struck her spine like a whip. Inside the Broken Spoke Saloon in Council Bluffs, Brody Fletcher lifted his whiskey glass halfway before freezing. The sudden cry of a woman outside cut through the evening noise like a blade. Men in the saloon turned toward the doors, but no one moved. Trouble was common in town. Trouble was expected, but something in the fear inside that scream pushed Brody to his feet. He stepped outside into the cool night, his spurs jingling with each step. A crowd of drunken men had gathered near a wagon parked in the street. Under the lantern light, Brody saw two men arguing loudly. Between them stood a young woman, her hands tied, hair tangled, eyes wide with terror. $500, the buyer barked. That's my final offer. She's worth more, Samuel Edwards snapped. Young, strong, and she can cook better than any woman you'll find this side of the Mississippi. The woman flinched as her brother shook her by the arm. Samuel, please, she begged. I'm your sister. Her brother slapped her across the face so hard she fell back a step. Gasps rose from the crowd. You stopped being my sister when Ma died, Samuel growled. Now you're just another mouth to feed. Brody felt something cold and hard settle inside his chest. He'd seen ugly things in his 32 years, but watching a man sell his own flesh and blood stirred a quiet rage deep in him. What's going on here? Brody asked, stepping forward. The crowd split. Samuel glared at him, jaw tight, eyes mean. Private business, Fletcher. Don't stick your nose in. Looks like you're selling a woman in the middle of town. That concerns more than just you. The buyer spat tobacco into the dirt. I'm paying fair. Brother says she's his to sell. Brody ignored him, his eyes locked with the woman's. In that single moment he saw fear, yes, but also something else. Something broken, but not gone. Something fighting to survive. How much? Brody asked calmly. Samuel's eyes brightened with greed. 700. 500. Brody countered, not looking away from the girl. 650. 550, Brody said, voice steady. And I don't tell Sheriff Mills about the Henderson cattle you stole last month. Samuel stiffened. That's a lie. Maybe, Brody said, but Henderson believes it. Samuel hesitated, swallowed, then nodded once. Fine, 550. As Brody counted out the bills and untied her wrists, the woman trembled, not from cold, but from shock, from betrayal, from fear of what came next. What's your name? Brody asked gently. Jasmine, she whispered. I'm Brody Fletcher, he said, and you're coming with me to my ranch. Fear flashed in her eyes. What? What will you expect of me? Brody's voice softened. Nothing you don't offer freely. You'll have a room, meals, fair work, and wages when you're ready. She stared at him, confused. Hope and suspicion warred across her bruised face. Why? She asked. Brody shrugged slightly. Because no one deserves to be treated like this, not even by their own kin. They rode away from town in Brody's wagon. Jasmine sat stiff and silent beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The stars stretched overhead like cold silver lines across the sky. When the wagon crested a hill, Brody pointed. That's the Fletcher Ranch. A two-story house, barn, bunkhouse, and corral stood quietly under the moon. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lanterns glowed softly in the windows. It's beautiful, Jasmine whispered. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Inside the house, Martha Rogers, Brody's longtime housekeeper and friend, took one look at Jasmine's bruised face and pulled her close. Poor girl, she murmured. Come along. Let's get you fed and cleaned up. Brody watched them disappear up the stairs. He didn't know why he'd bought her. He didn't know why he'd gotten involved. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe he was a fool. Maybe he was lonelier than he let himself admit. Later, as he sat on the porch, Martha joined him. That girl has been through hell, she said quietly. Bruises everywhere, and she's thin as a fence post. "She's safe now," Brody said. Martha studied him. "What made you do it, Brody?" Brody stared out at the dark fields. "I'm not sure." Martha smiled kindly. "Be careful, Brody. A woman with nowhere to go attaches fast, and you've been alone a long time." "I don't want attachments," Brody said firmly. Martha only smiled, the kind that said she knew better. Upstairs, Jasmine sat on the edge of the soft bed, clean, warm, fed, safe, for the first time in years. But fear still clung to her heart. Men didn't rescue women without wanting something, and when he discovered her secret, Jasmine's hand moved to her stomach, just a small swell, barely noticeable, 2 months along. A child she never asked for, a child that had come from pain, from a night she had fought desperately to escape. Tears slid down her cheeks. What would Brody Fletcher do when he discovered he'd bought a woman carrying another man's child? How long can a secret survive when every sunrise brings it closer to the light? Jasmine asked herself that question every morning as she stood at the window of her small upstairs room, watching the Fletcher ranch wake beneath the pale Nebraska sun. She had been here for weeks now, living in a place that felt more like a dream than reality. A warm bed, steady meals, and people who spoke to her with kindness instead of cruelty. It was everything she had prayed for during her darkest nights. But blessings often came with shadows, and the secret beneath her heart was growing. Her mornings always began quietly. She slipped out of bed before the house stirred and made her way behind the barn, where she pressed a hand to her mouth and waited for the morning sickness to pass. Sometimes Martha found her and said nothing, simply held her hair or rubbed her back with a gentle patience that made Jasmine's eyes fill with tears. But Brody noticed too. He noticed the way her face paled at breakfast, the way she pressed a hand absently against her stomach, the way her dresses had begun to fit differently. He noticed, but he never pushed, never questioned. He watched her with the silent patience of a man waiting for a truth he already suspected. Life at the ranch slowly shaped itself around her. She worked beside Martha in the kitchen, helped mend clothes for the cowboys, fetched water, and learned the small routines that kept the ranch running. The men respected her. Thomas adored her. Jack always tipped his hat and smiled whenever she passed by. But it was Brody she noticed the most. Every morning she saw him riding across the fields, tall and sure in the saddle. Every evening he returned covered in dust, sweat soaking his shirt, jaw set in that determined way she had learned meant he'd had a long day. He always paused when he saw her, always offered a small smile, always said her name gently. It was dangerous, the way her heart reacted to him. Dangerous because she knew she shouldn't want the comfort he offered. Dangerous because she was carrying a reminder of the worst moment of her life. Dangerous because she feared she was becoming attached to a future she wasn't meant to have. One warm evening, Brody found her sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun set behind the corral. The sky burned orange and gold, the colors reflected in her soft brown eyes. "Beautiful night," he said, taking a seat beside her. "It is," she agreed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Brody studied her quietly for a moment before speaking. "Jasmine, I want you to know something. Whatever brought you here, whatever happened before that night in town, none of that matters to me." Her breath caught. "How can you say that when you don't know everything?" "I don't need to know everything," Brody said. "Not until you're ready to tell me." Tears stung her eyes and she turned away, afraid he would see the truth too clearly. Brody leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I don't want anything from you, Jasmine. Not payment, not gratitude. You don't owe me nothing." Quote. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No man had ever looked at her without wanting something. She swallowed hard. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," Brody said softly. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. She had kept her secret locked inside for so long that the idea of speaking it aloud seemed impossible. But Brody waited. Calm, steady, patient. Jasmine took a breath that trembled. "I'm with child." Brody didn't react with shock or anger. Instead, his eyes softened as if he had expected this moment and had prepared himself for it. "I know," he said quietly. She stared at him, stunned. "You knew?" "I suspected," he replied. "You've been sick in the mornings, you get tired faster, and the way you hold your stomach sometimes." He gave a small, sad smile. "I've seen my sisters go through the same." Jasmine covered her face with her hands. "I was afraid you'd send me away." "I'd never do that," Brody said, his voice firm. "Not for this, not for anything." Her tears came fast then. "The baby isn't from anything good." His jaw tightened. "Your brother?" "No," she whispered. "A man he owed money to. Samuel gave me to him to settle a debt." Brody closed his eyes, as if holding back the storm building inside him. "I should have shot him that night." "No," she said quickly. "Then you would have hung. And where would this ranch be?" He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. "I'm sorry, Jasmine. For what happened to you. For what your brother did. For what you've carried alone." Jasmine wiped her cheeks. "You don't know how kind you are. Most men." "I'm not most men," Brody cut in gently. Silence fell between them, warm and full of things neither dared to say aloud. The sky had deepened to purple, stars beginning to glow overhead. Brody stood and offered her his hand. "Come inside. You need rest." She placed her hand in his, feeling the strength and safety of his grip. From that moment on, something unspoken, something fragile, something hopeful, began to grow between them. Days slipped by. Work continued. The ranch moved at its steady pace. But now Brody walked beside her a little more often. He made sure she drank enough water. He brought her small things, a flower, a smoother saddle cushion, slices of apple from the kitchen. Jasmine felt her heart warming in ways she had not allowed since before her mother died. But hope was dangerous, and Brody Fletcher was becoming her greatest danger of all. Because she was no longer afraid of him, she was afraid of wanting him, and wanting a life she thought she could never have. Could a woman broken by the past truly build a future brighter than her fears? Jasmine asked herself that question every time she felt her child move within her. Life at the Fletcher Ranch kept its steady rhythm, but inside her heart, something new was forming, something fragile, something she hardly dared name. Brody kept his word. He never pushed her, never judged her, never treated her as anything less than the equal she had never been allowed to be. And that patience, that quiet strength, made it harder every day for Jasmine to guard the walls she had built around her heart. Weeks passed, then months. Jasmine's stomach grew rounder, her steps slower. Martha hovered over her like a protective mother hen. Thomas made her laugh with silly stories at dinner. Jack always offered to carry buckets or firewood before Jasmine even needed to ask. But it was Brody she watched most closely. He had changed too. He came home earlier. He spent more evenings sitting beside her on the porch. He noticed everything. When she winced, when she sighed, when she smiled. Sometimes she caught him staring at her when he thought she wasn't looking. A softness in his eyes that made her chest ache. She had never known a man like him. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold, Brody stepped onto the porch and handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something from town," he said. "You didn't have to," she murmured, surprised. "I know," he said softly. "But I wanted to." Jasmine untied the string and opened the paper. Inside lay a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. Her lips parted as she traced the metal with trembling fingers. "Open it," Brody said. Jasmine pressed it open. Inside was a small slip of paper in careful handwriting. "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Her mother's favorite verse, the one she whispered on nights Jasmine cried herself to sleep. Tears filled her eyes. "How did you?" "My mom loved that verse," Brody answered, voice quiet. "I thought maybe you and the baby could use the reminder." Jasmine swallowed hard. "It's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me." Brody gently fastened it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, warm and careful. When she looked up at him, something deep passed between them. Something real, something certain, something neither could hide anymore. "Brody," she whispered, her heart thudding, "why are you so kind to me?" His jaw tightened just slightly, as if he were fighting words that wanted to escape. "Because you deserve kindness," he said finally. "Because you've carried too much alone. Because you—" He stopped. Jasmine waited. "Because you matter to me," Brody finished simply. The world tilted around her. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," he said softly. "Not yet." Before she could answer, Martha opened the door with a tray of warm bread, breaking the moment. But the truth had already settled between them, like glowing embers, waiting to catch flame. The months passed quickly after that. Brody left with his men for the long cattle drive to Kansas City. Jasmine watched him ride away with an ache she didn't dare name. She told herself it was worry or gratitude, but deep in her heart, she knew it was more. While Brody was gone, Jasmine's belly grew heavy. Benjamin moved and kicked often, surprising her with his strength. Martha taught her how to prepare for childbirth, telling her stories that made Jasmine both laugh and cry. But the nights were hardest. She would sit on the porch, one hand on her belly, and stare at the stars, whispering prayers she wasn't sure she had the right to say. "Please keep him safe. Please bring him home. Please let him feel the same way I am beginning to feel." 6 weeks later, dust rose on the horizon. The riders returned, tired but triumphant. Jasmine stood on the porch, her hands folded protectively over her swollen belly. Brody saw her instantly. His horse slowed, his breath caught, his eyes widened, not in shock but in something warm, something proud. She shifted nervously. "Welcome home." "You look well," he said, stepping closer. "So do you." Brody smiled, a low, soft smile that made her heart flutter. "Dinner smells good." "There's peach preserves," she said shyly. "I saved the best jar for you." "I'll fight a man for that jar," he said, making her laugh. That night, after the welcome feast, the others drifted away until only she and Brody remained on the porch. Lantern light glowed around them. Crickets filled the warm night air. "I need to tell you something," Brody said. Jasmine's breath caught. "I thought of you every day on that drive." Heat rushed to her face. "Brody." "You don't have to say anything," he added. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to know what you mean to me." She felt her throat tighten. "I don't know what to do with feelings like that." Quote, "Then let me show you," Brody said gently, slowly, patiently. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because when I saw you that night, I knew," Brody said simply. "I knew you were meant to be part of my life." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "I want to court you," he continued, "properly. Not rushing, not pushing, just giving us a chance, if you'll have me." Jasmine pressed a hand to her belly. "Brody, I'm carrying someone else's child." Brody stepped closer. "That child will be loved," he said, "as if he were my own." Her heart burst. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Brody, I want that too." Brody's smile lit the night. He leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, gentle as sunrise. It was the beginning of something beautiful. Benjamin was born on a cool autumn evening, hours of pain ending in the sweetest cry Jasmine had ever heard. Brody held the tiny boy in his arms, overwhelmed with pride and awe. "He's perfect," Brody whispered. "He is," Jasmine said, tears slipping down her cheeks. From that day forward, Brody treated Benjamin not as another man's child, but as his own flesh and blood. 3 months later, Brody knelt in the winter snow behind the house and took Jasmine's hands. "I want to give you my name. I want to raise this boy with you. I want a life with you. Jasmine Edwards, will you marry me?" Her answer was immediate. "Yes, Brody. 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was simple but full of joy, Martha cried. Thomas grinned proudly. Jack played a fiddle. Benjamin gurgled happily in Jasmine's arms as Brody kissed her with all the love in his heart. Jasmine Fletcher. It felt like a prayer answered. Life blossomed from that moment forward. Spring brought laughter, summer brought peace, and soon another baby, a girl named Sarah, with her mother's gentle smile and her father's bright blue eyes. Then came Robert, strong and spirited. Years passed, and the ranch thrived. Their home was full of children's voices, warm soup, fresh bread, and the kind of peace Jasmine once believed she would never know. One evening, while watching their children chase fireflies, Brody wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her temple. "You saved me," he whispered. "I was the one who needed saving," she answered softly. Brody shook his head. "No, Jasmine, you and that tiny boy you carried, you were my salvation." She smiled up at him, her eyes glowing with love. "And you were mine." Standing beneath the golden Nebraska sunset, surrounded by the family they built from broken beginnings, Jasmine realized something. Sometimes the most painful chapters lead to the most beautiful endings. And sometimes a cowboy doesn't rescue a girl. She rescues him right back.